I made a post the other day on Instagram and I said, is Novations saving the average wholesaler? What are your thoughts on Novations? Has it any impact to you? Because I know you're kind of playing in a different stratosphere.
95% of our deals are Novations.
Bam, another one.
And I think there's a couple of reasons for it. One, a lot of sellers got spoiled to getting these really high offers, right? Also, too, like everybody knows about Zillow. So the first thing they're going to be like, oh yeah, Zillow says 300, I want 300. So like what's happening is you have competition that they know what they're doing, yes. But then you have a lot of newbies that don't have a clue what they're doing and they're giving these crazy offers that aren't really real. So the only way to really succeed now, because it's so competitive and so many people messing up the deal for you because they're offering too much, that you got to novate it.
All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the Leads to Deals podcast, where we're going to talk about everything from leads to deals and everything we talk about leads to deals. Today, I'm super excited to have somebody I've had my eye on for almost about 4 years in this industry now. I consider him one of those young OGs. He's even been called the godfather of nationwide wholesaling, nationwide investing. He's really been plugged into the hedge funds and how to kind of work within that buy box there. And so I'm super proud and super thankful for Vic to join us from the beach. He's literally at the beach coming into this podcast. So Victor Heredia, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me on here. It's an honor. Thank you for having me.
Dude, you're welcome. The very first time I met you was many moons ago. It's like I had just first gotten into this. I think it was at an event in Miami or something. I bumped into you.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Ricardo's event.
Yeah. And dude, I loved your vibe. I loved your wife's vibe. Like you guys just had like super awesome energy.
Thank you.
One of the things that you immediately opened my eyes to is we were talking about markets and stuff that was going on, and you started rattling off like multiple markets at once, like this nationwide mindset. And genuinely, I had clients, but everybody who did cold calling really only did just like one market or was only really established in one market. But you were one of the first people I met that did nationwide. So can you walk us through like what your definition of nationwide's been, what your journey has been outside of just your local backdoor market as a real estate investor?
Well, the reason was that we started doing more other markets is because we're in Phoenix, right?
Yep.
And as you know, Phoenix is a super competitive market. So it's not easy to get deals.
Yeah.
It's tough, right? So I'm like, what can we do to increase our deal conversion, right?
Yes.
So when I first started, I worked for another company in 2008, and they were targeting foreclosures only. Like for years, I think for the past 20, 30 years, a lot of investors have always focused on foreclosures because that's the highest motivation, right? So I'm like, well, it's tough to get foreclosed properties in Arizona because there's so much competition. So I'm like, well, why not hit foreclosures in other markets? Nice. So that's what we started doing. But then what happened, we contacted with the hedge funds and they were buying in 30 markets. So that's how we got into that. We just started focusing on their buy box.
Everybody who's in the REI space that listens to this podcast, they're all in very tertiary markets or even some primary A+ markets. And they all kind of say the same thing. Like there's somebody at a REIA group right now in the middle of backwoods Tennessee talking about, well, it's super competitive. I'm like, bro, do you know about Phoenix? Like when you say it's super competitive in Arizona, you're like one of the few people that have earned the right to say it's competitive. Yeah. Y'all's level of competition is A1. I mean, it is the creme de la creme. And I see guys like you and I'm like, yo, those skill sets you learned to be successful there allow you to domino into almost any market because you've had to overcome so much to maintain your success.
Correct. And we're still very active in Arizona because it's our home state. So we still do deals here. And we kind of like it because we are, if the deal's nearby, we can go see them in person. So that does help. And it increases your conversion substantially because now you get body language, right?
Yes.
But, we love the nationwide model. It is a little bit more work. You got to be better with your tonality and your personality. You got to be really good with psychology. But it still works. So that's what it comes down to. I mean, we go where the money's at.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. It's not that it's impossible, but I've witnessed and helped a lot of people and been close to these guys that are in Arizona that then can go into other markets. But I've also watched guys from outside try to go into your guys' market. And it's not that, there's still deals everywhere. It's the cost per deal. It's the cost per lead
Yeah.
that's so high. And if you don't have that bandwidth financially to be able to withstand what it really takes to do velocity in a market like Arizona, you're just going to come in and think there's no deals. And it's not that there's no deals. You just ran out of marketing spend before you got to your deals.
Correct. Exactly. 100%.
Yeah, I see guys like you and I say, okay, hedge fund. I haven't heard the word hedge fund in forever. So give us the skinny, like what is the current status of hedge funds to a guy like you who built great relationships for years with these guys? What are they saying?
There's a couple that are still buying, but they're buying at a deep discount. You're still, because I heard, oh, so-and-so is buying. So I submitted deals to them just to see what the offer would be like. It was still worse than a cash offer. I'm like, well, at that price, I'll just buy it myself. So they're still, they're buying, but they're still not paying a really good price for us, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, eventually, I think as soon as interest rates continue to drop, I think they're going to come back in and they're going to come back in strong.
Yeah, I think what I witnessed, and I was telling you kind of off camera, like, dude, I didn't really know much. I made my money in another industry, and I came into your guys, and I just took the marketing skills that I learned and applied them here. But I came in and the market was just up and to the right, like no whispers, so much capital into it. And so I just thought it really was, guys who were bouncing. I thought it was normal that people go, I'm going from Amazon automation, Vic, and then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to NFT this, and then I'm going to wholesale this. And I just literally, I was like, oh, that's just a cash free for all. And they were doing it mainly because of the hedge funds. But when the hedge funds stopped, what did you witness? Like, what kind of changes did you see in the landscape of competitors out there when the hedge funds stopped?
Well, for example, like for us, we had a ton of properties under contract and some of them actually sold. They just paused buying. I'll tell you a crazy story. A friend of mine brought me a deal, Rafael. It was for 72 properties, I believe.
Wow.
And we submitted it to the fund. It took the seller a month to sign the contract. But from when we first started, we were going to make like $600,000 on that deal.
Woo.
Because they made me an offer and we went like 600,000 under it. By the time the guy signed the contract, our assignment had dropped to $300,000, right? Which is still good. It's a good assignment, but it's 50% less. So we were pretty bummed out. The week that they signed that the seller signed the contract, I then submitted the contract back to the fund. And the interest rates had just dropped. And they're like, hey, Vic, I'm sorry. I'm like, hey, what's going on? Like, you're not getting back to us. And usually they would get back to us right away.
Yeah.
You're like, hey, I'm sorry. We paused buying. So I lost that deal. I mean, this 300,000 just disappeared just like that. So that happened to a lot of people. We lost quite a bit, I think like 200,000 in a 3-month period because we're dumping so much money into marketing because they just stopped buying. So yeah, it was a big hit for us, for a lot of my friends. A lot of guys went out of business. So yeah, it was a challenge. It was a challenge.
Yeah, I witnessed it. And what I felt is a lot of guys were able to be successful. And this is nothing personal. This is strictly strategy as a business operator or CEO. But they were able to be successful without a lot of good operational principles or sales skills. And it really was like an order taking type of situation.
Correct.
And as that's tightened up, I've watched the guys who really understand how to treat a lead succeed, how to nurture a lead succeed, how to track the KPIs and be able to do this. Because like you said, even you at a nationwide scale right now, your cost per leads are going to be different in various markets. And if you don't know exactly what your target should be, it could be really easy to just start sliding in the wrong direction and look up and be like, oh, we're done.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. You got to be really cognizant of your cost per lead because it can really hurt you.
I didn't have this question on my list because I was doing some research and I said, man, this guy's Mr. Bolt-on business. Dude, you got these little arms like sticking out in all these little places. You got a great skip company now and you got this other little fund and you're working portfolios. You got all this cool stuff. But I wanted to go back to what drove you towards the larger number deals. Did you have an aha moment, Vic, where you were like, you know what, man, we just keep on wholesaling in this obscure market and we're making 20K. It's the same amount of effort if I go for X, Y, and Z. Was there that aha moment, or did you just always start big?
No, well, I knew you got to follow the money, right? You go where the money's at. So I worked for my cousin who was very successful. He had a big produce company, and I noticed once we started to focus on bringing on the big global or national companies as clients is when the business really took off. So once we started doing business with Walmart and Whole Foods, which were my clients, the business really took off. And then down in Mexico, the farm, they started dealing with a couple of Japanese conglomerates.
Wow.
In Japan, and then that client went gangbusters. So you want to go where the money's at. So I never wanted to like focus on doing one or two deals to a cash buyer. And eventually, I wanted to do something on a larger scale. So I had a deal. I'll tell you the story. I had a deal in Austin, Texas. So I started looking for buyers because you look for buyers in that area, right?
Of course.
There was a buyer that had at that time 23,000 properties. I just found them on PropSheet. 23,000, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait a second, who are these guys? So I looked them up. Sure enough, it was a fund out of Austin. So I contacted them. It took me 3 months of persistence to finally get them to call me back. But I knew if I could connect with these guys, like I'm in the money. So
Nice.
I was just persistent. You got to go where you got to follow where the money, you want to go where the money is going, right? You want to get in front of that money, right? That's the key. Get in front of the money. So that's what I focused on.
Yeah, listen, there's so many things to glean from that, but those guys and gals out there, like that level of persistence that it takes to be willing to deal with like 90 days worth of rejection or longer. Yeah. Like just because they responded in 90 doesn't mean you were going to give up in 91. Like you knew the opportunity that you had for them as well too. Because if you could be direct to seller, because a lot of these funds, I mean, they don't really have that in. They're really good on the capital side and the rehab side and the portfolio side, but not on the direct to seller side. And so having a trusted voice like you, that's like you're providing them value and you want them to see you too. When you got that first list and you saw, okay, like, oh my God, you're in 30 markets. What marketing strategy did you deploy when you started bolting on? Were you primarily cold call in other markets, or did you cut on PPC?
It was at that time, it was cold calling and text. That's all we did, cold calling and text. And so they would give you your buy box, and then we would just target that buy box. Once we got a deal under contract, we would submit it for an offer. Sometimes we wouldn't even get it under contract. We would just submit it for an offer, and then we'd go back and lock it up. So yeah, it kind of was like order taking, but it still took some sales skills. I mean,
of course,
sales skills, but yeah, it was a lot easier than it is now. Touching on one thing that you mentioned about persistence, the reason I learned that because when I got Whole Foods, I emailed them for 3 years straight. And everyone knows it's a great client. They're good to do business with. I mean, they're huge, right? And I knew like eventually there's other suppliers going to drop the ball at some point. It's going to happen because everybody, that's business. Everybody does that.
Yep.
So I emailed them for 3 years straight. And finally they're like, okay, let's talk. So I knew if I was persistent with this fund, eventually they would come around.
I don't know if your wife's in earshot, but I'm thinking in my head, like, I bet you she's got a story about how persistent you were.
Yeah.
You know, a guy like that is willing to wait 3 years for a purchase PO for a fruit company. Yeah, I'm sure, man. It's every part of your DNA.
I never quit. And my wife is starting her own e-commerce business. And I told her the attitude you have to go into it with is I'm going to make it work no matter what.
Yeah.
Like it's going to happen. Like, I don't care what happens or what doesn't happen. I'm going to make it happen, period. So once you have that mindset, it's going to happen for you. But you have to have that mindset. It's going to happen. I don't give a shit what else happens. I'm going to make this succeed no matter what. And that's really the attitude you have to succeed in I think in any business.
Yeah, I try to tell these kids as they come. I have this call center here, and you know, one of the life lessons that they're going to get used to is the value of rejection. And you know, to successfully convert a lead, it might be 250 connects You know, a lot of people are screw you, wrong number, what are you calling me for, et cetera, to get to that one. And most people in their lives haven't had to deal with that level of rejection to get what the smallest morsel of success may be. And for me in sales, it really just taught me the value of counting the no's just as equal as I do a yes, because I know it's mathematics. It's going to take, like you said, 365 days of emails to get to that one. I'm prepared to be able to do it. So that resiliency is what made you a successful entrepreneur.
I knew it was a numbers game, and I knew you get paid for the no's. But you know what's interesting? I first learned it wasn't so much. I learned about it's a numbers game and rejection, not from sales. When I was like 16 years old, I think or 17. I was watching. They were interviewing the lead singer for Motley Crue.
Okay.
And they told him, man, you're always with the most beautiful women, all these supermodels. Of course, he was a rock star, right?
Sure.
But they asked him, but how did you do it? How do you do it? You're with so many beautiful women. And his answer surprised me. I'm like, well, the guy's a rock star. He's like, you know what? He goes, I get rejected 8 out of 10 times. He goes, but 2 of them always say yes. I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. So that kind of stuck with me as well,
That's cool, man. How old are you, Vic?
I'm 50.
50. Damn, you're a young 50. I'm on your heels. I'm about 6 years away right now from you.
Gotcha.
Dude, that's great. You got kids?
Yeah, I got a 20-year-old stepson and an 11-year-old boy.
Dude, I love it. Yeah, and I think about our lives as aggressive, positioned entrepreneurs and setting that example. Did you have that in your family growing up, or is this something that you kind of picked up on your own as you turned into adulthood?
Well, part of it is personality. I think I'm kind of chill, but internally I'm very aggressive, right?
Yeah, you're on fire internally. Yeah, I can feel it.
That's partly, but also too, my cousin was my mentor. He had a company, 2,000 to 3,000 employees.
Wow.
And I worked with him for 20 years. So I learned a lot. He was very aggressive, but also he had the most friends of any person I know. I mean, the most friends. He was very, very, very socially adept with dealing with people. Yeah. But he was very aggressive. So I learned a lot from him, just watching him. He was my mentor. So I think that really helped as well.
Yeah, that's great, man. And so from the food supply company, what were you guys specializing in? Avocados, I assume, out of Mexico, or what else?
Primarily, avocados was one line, but primarily organic bananas.
Organic bananas. Super. Amazing. What part of Mexico?
Down in Colima.
Okay,
Colima,
very
Mexico.
cool. And so you were living there originally and then you moved to Arizona, or you were born in Arizona?
I was born in the U.S. and I ran their U.S. operations.
Nice. I dig it. And then I saw, as I was going through your bio, somebody who I have extreme respect for, which is Carlos Reyes. And I never had the opportunity to meet Sal yet, but I just have watched, and I'm an outsider again, take it what it is. I've watched Carlos give birth, for lack of a better way, to a lot of the gurus that I see out there in the space. And I don't know if he doesn't get as much credit as he should, but I at least want to give him his flowers. I've watched him be an impact. And to the real operators too, guys like yourself as well too. So what was your interaction with Carlos Reyes in the beginning?
Well, to be honest, I did my first deal with Carlos.
Nice.
So I learned about real estate and wholesaling through Ty Lopez had a young guy. And a lot of people ask me about this story, so I've told it before, but
let me
Ty Lopez had a young guy on they were doing a coaching program, a guy named Jalen White. I found out about him. Then I learned about his best friend, Alex Science, who now we're friends. Nice. And then Carlos Reyes. So I hit up Alex, but I didn't really get much. He replied, but there was no really interaction. But when I hit up Carlos, I'm like, hey, man, I'm impressed by you guys. You guys are younger than me. We're from the same part of Phoenix, Maryville. So super impressed with what you've done. He's like, hey, dude, roll through the office. So I went to the office. We chatted for a bit. He's like, hey, send me your deal. 10 days later, I'm like, hey, Carlos, does this like a deal? He's like, yeah, lock it up. And we sold it within 2 weeks or 10 days. And then we made $22,000 on it. So my first deal was with Carlos.
Nice. I love it. Yeah. I love following his content. And like I said, I've seen a lot of people that have been in that sphere of influence make an impact in this industry. And that's what you look for myself, for you, for Carlos, for anybody out there as a man. You want to have that butterfly effect on those around you. And you want to give them something.
And I think you're right. What you say, I think a lot of guys, if not most of them, they went to one of his events, him and Sal's events. I know Pace did. I mean, a ton of guys did.
Yeah.
And Pace still gives him his props, but yeah, I know, he doesn't get enough props, unfortunately.
No. Well, it's here on this podcast because I seen it. I watched it. I get to see up close. I want to ask you though. I watch a lot of investors out there, or not even investors, wholesalers that never graduate beyond just that initial wholesaling leg. And they never actually become investors themselves. And they get caught on this mousetrap. And it's always one transaction after one transaction, never portfolios, never taking anything down, never kind of building something with either a higher cash flow or some type of asset building. So I know you kind of navigated it on the hedge fund side on the larger deals. Are you taking anything down for yourself? Have you gotten to that? Have you purposely avoided that? What's going on?
Yeah, we've done a lot of flips.
Great.
They've been our best deals. They've been our worst deals. So just FYI. So in this market, because when it's a little bit of a volatile market, you want to be careful. I prefer to wholesale. Sean Terry, which is my mentor as well, he talks about it as well, that right now you want to wholesale as much as you can, or hotel, whatever you call it. So we do a flip if it's a really good deal. Yeah. As far as buying rentals, I got some friends that are doing it, but we're not doing it now. My good friend now, he was one of my main buyers. Good friends now. He owns 1,200 properties.
Wow.
And he's like, hey, Vic, when we're ready, let's start buying rentals. Because we're going to partner up on an additional fund for rentals. And I'm like, hey, are we ready? He's like, no, man. He was at 6% plus. It's hard to cash flow property. So I'm not buying rentals right now. We got to wait a little bit. So I think we might be a year out before we actually start some rentals.
Yeah. Speaking of, being your best and your worst, we took the property down in Pensacola, on the water, on the bay. I mean, this screamed everything that was perfect for us. I said, we can't wholesale this. We were going to wholesale it and make 50. We ain't wholesaling that. That was going to be my vacation home. Yeah. What a disaster this property has been. I mean, just because of the driveway was too steep, and then we had to redo the pier and we redo everything. And now it's to the point where it's like, we're just going to list it and hope that we break even. So sometimes it happens on those like that. And I was like, do I really want a long-term vacation home there? I don't know. But it's part of the business.
Yeah, I had a deal in Charlotte where a buyer, when I got it locked up, he offered me, we were going to make $80,000 on it. But since then, the market tanked. We had bad contractors, and we actually lost money on it. I should have wholesaled it. We had the chance, right? So it's not always your best option. You gotta have a good contractor. You got to know the market. And make sure you're on it. Like, try to turn that property fast, because that hard money will kill you.
Yeah. Have you done much with pad split? Have you heard of that? I don't know if it's out there in your areas.
No, I've not done that. I'm looking more into rent to own.
Nice.
Rent to own.
Smart.
Pad splits I haven't done.
So we got a couple of Airbnbs, Vic, that we've converted over to pad splits because the Airbnb just isn't performing like it was last year. And it's been good. I had a girl here today for a job interview that's a TC at another company here in town, ironically enough. And I'm in Colombia, South America, and she's a TC for another company. And she's like, yeah, one of our pad splits, it was a 5-bedroom. We now have it as an 8-person house. So it's got 8, they knocked down some walls, turned it into 8 people. And then the HOA just passed a rule like this month for that house in particular. So now like they're screwed. And it's like, there's some dynamics to it out there when you're an investor, but the advantages I feel as a wholesaler and getting access to this inventory is we get to cherry pick the ones that we have the most confidence in. Correct. And then let the other ones go. And it's such a unique position. People ask, they say, Scott, are you afraid of the market or the interest rates? And I say, the way I look at it is I buy at a discount when it's high. I buy at a discount when it's low. Yeah. So there's obviously ebbs and flows, but we're still in the best position out of anybody in the food pyramid.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. I mean, some guys look down on wholesalers, but the reality is, we have less risk. So I prefer that, right? I prefer that.
Can you walk me through nationwide comping and then what comping means to you in addition to when you have these hedge funds? Is it a little bit outside of the box, or what's happening there?
Well, you know what? Because I've been comping now. I've been doing this for 6 years. And so now the first thing I do is I look at if it's a single family home, first thing I look at is Redfin. Redfin is pretty accurate. I mean, it might be off by 10%, but it's pretty accurate for a comp. But
Nice.
then, that's when we negotiate, right? But once we're going to like go send a contract, then I'll look it up on PropStream, and then I do like comps, similar bed, similar bath, 10-year plus minus 10% square foot plus minus. And that, between those two, like, my comps are always spot on. Like we normally don't screw it up.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that you don't appreciate until you've been in it so well. Having somebody who can do comps, I look at it as an art. And I'm sure it really is scientific, but I swear sometimes there's that nuance, that thought, that light bulb. Well, actually, let me check over here on this street that goes off, because I watch a lot of guys go into new markets and they're like, yo, bro, I just locked up 5 deals this week in this market. And then back in my head, I'm like, oh, let's pray, get the rosaries for you, buddy, because that's either you're a rock star and you just hit a gold stream you've never hit, or you overpaid for every one of those contracts and you're going to cancel them.
The thing is, and it is in some markets, like Dallas, Houston, like in Phoenix, the subdivision is like a square mile. So it's easy to comp, right? Yes. But in Dallas, Houston, you can have like 3-4 subdivisions in 1 square mile. So that you got to dig in. Yeah. So Redfin is like a quick and easy. But it's not like the best thing. You want to dig in. We use PropStream for that.
I got a buddy of mine, his name's Samuel Abundez, and he's in Chicago. And that's one of those markets where it's like same streets can be off. Correct. Like you can be on one end of the street and it'd be off. And so being boots on the ground in those markets are really helpful. Yeah. But there's a lot of activity going on in the Midwest right now. There's a lot of deal flow happening in the Midwest. And so I know you're more focused on larger portfolios, but since you're going to where the puck is going, right? Like you're trying to follow where the cash is going. What is your vantage point that you maybe can share? Like, hey, listen, these are the markets these guys are still playing in, although a smaller spread and a higher volume, but this is where money is still sitting today.
So number one, they do send me their buy box, like, hey, we're still buying in these cities. So then I know, okay, there's still activity in those cities. But also too, I think on Zillow, you can look it up. They have a heat index. Mm-hmm. It tells you what the hottest market is. So I combine that, I get that with the heat index. And then I look at days on market. And then I look at, markets with 30 days or less. And then I combine the two, and then I'll pick from that list, which is like 100 some cities, then I'll pick the cities that I like the most, and then we'll target those cities. So that's what we do. But again, we're very active in our home state because we're here, boots on the ground. We're active in Florida because I have a really good realtor that I work with in Florida. So there's some markets that we just like. So we focus on those markets. But on Zillow, if you do some research, you can find one of the best markets in the country.
Let's give the listeners something actionable to work with here. We both love data. We're going to talk about your skip tracing company here in a little bit. But is there certain like lists that you're trying to target because of the hedge fund that maybe somebody else who's just doing one-to-one transactions isn't? Is there certain motivations that you really like that you've learned over the past 6 years? You're like, hey, man, when I go after these.
So when we were doing hedge funds, it was their buy box and then absentee high equity, right? Sure. Absentee free and clear or absentee out-of-state owned. That's because we needed we had 30 callers, we needed a lot of data. That's with hedge funds. But now when it's more niche, we're doing foreclosures, we're doing divorce, we're doing absentee out-of-state owned. We're doing tire landlords, so it is much more niche data because you can't just hit everything when you need a big discount on the property.
And for you in foreclosure data, you're pre-foreclosure. Do you kind of have an understanding as to roughly where you're getting that data record prior to the foreclosure? Has an auction date been sent yet, or this is kind of like just an extended behind due notice?
Usually there's an auction date. There's always an auction date. I mean, your best bet is finding a provider that can give you data direct from the county. Yeah, exactly. If that's number one. If not, number two, we love PropStream because it's easy to use. Yeah. But for foreclosure data, batch leads is actually, I think, the best one. So when I'm pulling foreclosure data, I'm pulling it from batch.
So let me ask you this. Somebody in the comment section is like, dude, never sell to hedge funds. It's like taking us all out of business. We'll never be able to wholesale again. It's the opposite of job security. Now, where's your mindset on the anti-hedge fund, thoughts that happen in this industry? Because you either love them because they're feeding you, or you look at them as the devil because of what they're obviously doing is just building this massive fortress. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think they're ever going to buy like every property in the country. That's just not going to happen, right?
I agree.
Also, again, they have a buy box, so it's either a 1980 plus or 1970 plus. It's a 3.2. It's a very specific property avatar that they're looking for, right? But also, too, my best month we did over $300,000, and it was all hedge fund deals. And our operational expenses were maybe 15% of that. So, we made money, you know what I mean? So sorry.
What I saw when the hedge fund, and I still mean it today, is like a lot of people were like, hey man, I got this list from the hedge fund. Which city do you like the most? And I'm like, okay, I can tell you which one's the most active. And I'm gonna use St. Louis, for example. Let's say St. Louis is on SFR3 and everybody's got the same list and everybody's going there. I'm like, what people don't appreciate is how narrow that buy box is and how good you actually have to be with that buy box. Because it's not like, hey, there's 2 million people here, of which I would normally pull all these distressed records, which is this big. No, theirs is a 3-bedroom built after 1950 with red carpet or whatever their buy box is. That's such a small data set that is now being hit from every cowboy from Arizona with big guns like Victor Heredia, his crews calling into this market. I think people really underappreciate what that list means. Yeah. It means most people have that list, and that small data set is going to get destroyed.
Well, that's exactly why when we were selling the hedge funds, we were hitting up 15 to 22 cities.
Yes.
Because of that reason. It just, one city, there's just not enough. I mean, there's enough data, like if you're not door knocking, right? But if you got a team of cold callers, it's just not enough data. You got to do it in multiple states.
And dude, I'm telling you, when it was crazy, I know everybody in the call center space. They're like, dude, I have 6 people and calling into Phoenix. And this other guy's like, dude, I got 5 clients calling, and he's got 2 clients. And it's just like, dude, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dials a day going into these markets on hedge funds, and these people just getting blown up. So it was definitely wild, wild west. As that died, though, one thing I think helped say, I made a post the other day on Instagram, and I said, is Novations saving the average wholesaler? And I had a little bit of hate, and I had a lot of people who were like, F yeah. But I'm telling you, my players right now, I mean, guys that are doing real volume a month, 80-90% of all their deals, either they're an investor and they're taking everything down and they're really dialed in on their buy box, or they're a wholesaler, but they're novating 80 to 90% of all their deals. So what are your thoughts on Novations? Has it any impact to you? Because I know you're kind of playing in a different stratosphere.
95% of our deals are Novations.
Bam, another one.
Exactly. So the problem, I think there's a couple of reasons for it. One, a lot of sellers got spoiled to getting these really high offers, right? Also, too, like everybody knows about Zillow. So the first thing they're going to be like, oh yeah, Zillow says 300, I want 300.
Yep.
Yeah. And then you got a lot of competition, but then you got a lot of newbies that don't have a clue what the hell they're doing. Like I got guys sending me a deal. He's like, hey, I got this property for 300. Will you do 285? I'm like, bro, that's not a deal, right?
Yeah.
Or I got a guy sending me a deal, and he's like, hey, I got this deal for 300, and it's listed for 315. I'm like, what are you talking about? So like, what's happening is you got competition that they know what they're doing, but then you have a lot of newbies that don't have a clue what they're doing, and they're giving these crazy offers that aren't really real because they're not educating themselves. I've literally had conversations with guys. I'm like, bro, you have to go spend $500, get yourself a course to learn the business. Because I'm like, I'm telling you, man, you're hustling, you're making the calls, you're making the offers, but you're spinning your wheels. You're never going to close a deal. Like you're offering way too much money. And I've had that conversations many times, by the way, because I'm trying to help guys out, you know.
Sure.
And they don't get it. Like you got to buy at a discount. So the only way to really succeed now, because it's so competitive and so many people messing up the deal for you because they're offering too much, that you got to novate it. You got to be able to list it on the market. So, I
Yeah.
mean, that's just the way the market is.
I'll give you a real example. The app Clubhouse really hit strong in the REI space
Yeah,
for like 6 to 9 months. It was this app
correct.
it's almost like you're
Yeah, I
just
remember
talking
that.
into it.
That's when
Yep.
COVID hit, right?
Yep. When COVID
Yeah.
hit. And most of the influencers on that app were in the Atlanta market. And so what you
Interesting.
saw was happening a lot. What happened in Phoenix is Phoenix was this like breeding ground of gurus. And then you had all these college kids wanting to do it. And you had all these local kids. And you had all these people who, just because of the sheer proximity to these influencers, began picking up the craft. And I watched the amount of call volume skyrocket from a competition standpoint. I could feel it in our answer rates. I could feel it. I could literally see the impact that Clubhouse made in the Atlanta market specifically. And then I saw the offers that these kids were making, because we were coming in and making our offers with our traditional investors who weren't on that app. And the
Yeah,
prices were insane. I mean, like full ARV offers. So it
correct.
speaks to exactly that. Like these newbies, they're paying an education tax, but also the sellers who unfortunately have to interface with the newbies end up paying an education tax as well, too.
Oh, 100%. And then that's what burns the wholesaler's reputation, because
Yep.
oh yeah, we got it under contract and they never performed. Well, it's like, well, of course they didn't perform. They offered way too much money. They're never going to sell that deal. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does affect the industry pretty
Yeah.
bad.
I think Novations is a great exit strategy. I think it's just what it is. It's like a tool in your bag, and you
Yeah.
use it throughout the seasons and throughout the markets. And there's always this ebb and flow. But being able to take down a property when you can cherry pick the right deal for yourself, being able to find those, being able to wholesale the ones that are just best for that cash and offering that service to the seller, and then having that Novations exit strategy really allows you to be diversified enough to continue to grow in this business and stack a little bit and be a successful entrepreneur, but not a hobbyist. I think I've seen most hobbyists kind of go to the wayside,
Yeah.
and that I was excited to see.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's a lot of guys that are no longer in the business, and the weaker guys, they couldn't make it.
So now let's talk data, dude. So tell me what you're doing with your new skip trace company. What made you decide to get into it? And then tell me the X factor, like why you.
Well, we always do skip tracing. We've been doing skip tracing for years, right? And then I was involved in helping to start a different skip tracing company.
Nice.
And then during that time, because we were doing research and whatnot, I had another company hit me up, and they were after me for about a year to do skip tracing. So then I'm like, hey, well, let me try this data. I started trying the data. It was really, really good data. Price is very competitive. It's credit bureau data, but also they aggregate AI. So when you do a search for skip tracing, it's the same data that all the major data companies use. It's the same data. So I partnered with them, started working with them, and launched Quality Skip. And we're providing data now at 6 cents a skip. So I think for the price, it's the best data out there for the price. I think it's really competitive.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's quite well.
It sounds like it, and I want to kind of give you your flowers on it while you say it here, because what I learned is like there's backbones to the industry. What I mean by that is like there's like one or two major core address assessor providers, right? And there's like one or two major data providers. And to be able to have credit bureau backbone type data, and then whatever type of specialty you guys are using, whether it's the scoring AI, some type of relationship data AI that you guys are running over top of it, really helps exceed the traditional value. So not only are you getting real backbone data closer to the source at a cheaper price, but you're getting something that should be able to provide us a little bit extra of an advantage in my marketplace.
Correct, 100%. And basically, but the reality is it's almost exact same data as everyone else is getting,
right?
But at 50% less, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, you can't beat that, And although there's some data out there that's super dirt cheap, that's kind of trash. One thing I found out doing research is that when you submit your list to a skip tracing company, the ones that have been in the business for a long time, they already have that data in their database. Mm-hmm. So it might be a skip from 3 years ago that you're getting, right? And a lot of companies are doing that. They're like, hey, I got 9 million records available. Submit your list and I'll send you the data, but a lot of it's 2-3 years old, right?
Yeah.
Whereas ours, when you send a file in, it's a fresh skip. Every
Yeah.
skip is fresh. We never recycle data. We never store data. And also too, like, there's been some stories of some guys, you send them a list and they end up using your data. With us, it goes to our system, auto populates, and then it gets sent back. So it's fresh data. Every skip is fresh.
What you said about sending people the data and then maybe they use it. That's how I felt about that. What was the name of that provider that you could see if there was a known litigators? Man, I didn't trust that damn thing for like 2 years. There's known litigator. I was like, man, there ain't no way these guys know all these known litigators. I ain't going to send them my address. I found out over time, evidently, it's a reputable source everybody used, but I was scared of those guys for like 2 years. I'm not giving these strangers. Right?
Yeah, exactly. You wonder, but there's so much, like, technology is huge now. It just makes a big difference in your business success. And it's interesting. I met the CEO of Amherst, one of the biggest funds out there. And I just happened to go to an event and he was speaking there. He never does speaking engagements. And I asked him, I'm like, how did you guys scale to such a large size so fast? And he's like, technology. I go, really? He's like, yeah. He goes, you can scale faster with technology, but you can't with people. I was like, that's interesting. I mean, they have people, but technology was really what got them to, now they own 50,000 properties. So you have to use technology as much as you can. And when I first started, I was very, I like to do it like more manually. Yeah. But now as time goes on, you start to realize like technology is really what's needed to drive the business. Like a lot of guys that are killing the industry now, they're young guys because they're good with tech.
Yeah. Speaking of tech, if I'm submitting records on Quality Skip, is the URL? Yeah.
Quality Skip. Yeah.
So I'm going to Quality Skip. Is there any advice that you give me on how to prepare my data? And if I don't get a match, how I should resubmit those? Can you give us any advice there?
Yeah. So because sometimes people just send us a property address, but to do an accurate skip, you want the owner of the property. You don't want the tenant. So we tell people to always send us the property address and the mailing address. Of course, full address, city, state, zip code, just to make sure it's the correct data.
I don't think I've ever seen the industry. I mean, this is my first kind of like one of these kind of mini market type industries I've been in. But man, the quality control of data standards for people in this industry is terrible. Like these CSVs, these Excel spreadsheets, people delete columns, they keep this, they merge this, the address is all in one space. It's the worst thing I've ever seen in my life.
The worst, exactly.
It's crazy. And I say, okay, all right. So if you want to handle that ingestion, God bless you, and provide them some feedback. I love it. Yeah. Let's talk about another one of your kind of big things. I think that it's a value add. If I have a portfolio, this is the gospel. I was looking at whose data set was I looking at? I was looking at somebody's data set the other day, and I was looking at why there were so many duplicate mailing addresses. And it wasn't like a Regis office, and it was a non-LLC owned list. So it's all humans. And then this one person had like 40 some properties, which I thought was odd because most of the times you're in the 10s, 20s, 30s, and 40s, you're in a LLC. And so I was like, okay, cool. So this is an actual person who owns a large portfolio themselves. If I call up Barbara Smith and she says, hey, I got 40 properties all around here. Me and my husband bought over the past 20 years. I'm looking to get rid of them all and blah, blah, blah. And I need help moving this portfolio. Why should I reach out to you? What can you help me with? Is that something that you can help me with if I have a portfolio that needs to move?
Yeah, the reason is when you have a portfolio seller, like he wants an offer, right?
Yep.
But like it's not like a typical 1 or 2 properties where you're like, oh, I got to be at, rehab minus my profit, minus closing costs, you can't do that because one, you have to make sure like you underwrite it properly, but also two, like you got to like, if you sign a contract for 30 properties, like they're going to ask you for a $50,000 EMD.
Yep.
Right. So you're on the hook. So what we do, we submit it to our fund and they're like, hey, I'm like, hey, this is the deal. These are the rents. This is the Excel file. Can you give me an offer? And they're like, well, what do they want for the property? And then I tell them what they want for the property, but I factor in my fee, right? And then they send me back the offer like, hey, Vic, this is what I can do. So then now I know what they offered me. Then I'll go to whoever sent me, like, let's say, Scott, you send me the deal. I'm like, hey, Scott, we got an offer at $5 million. Let's offer him 4.5. And then you'll go to your client, you offer 4.5. If it sticks, great. If it doesn't, we got to negotiate, et cetera, et cetera. But at least now we know we already got the offer for $5 million from the portfolio buyer, right? And then at that point, all it is locking it up and then sending the contract to the end buyer. So it makes it a lot easier.
I love it. And it's outside of most people's wheelhouse. A lot of times people, they don't know how to handle those types of leads. So they end up fumbling a really huge opportunity.
Yeah.
So to be able to reach out to a guy like you and say, hey, listen, this is what I have. I'd like to see if you wanted to partner and gain some of your knowledge would be huge.
Yeah, because once you have the relationship, which we do, it's actually easier than locking up a wholesale deal.
Right.
Because all you're doing is like, hey, here's the Excel file. Can you make me an offer? They're like, yeah, let's get on it. And the great thing, I have 3 funds I work with, but a lot of these funds, they do business with each other. So when I'm submitting a deal to 3 funds, there's probably like 18 funds that are looking at that portfolio.
Yes.
So we're going to get an offer, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's we want to make that more of our focus moving forward.
If somebody's watching this and like, man, that Victor guy, I'm so tired of, getting one house every X amount of months and whatever it may be. How does one go about targeting the right portfolio? And what is your definition of a portfolio? I guess let's start there. What is your definition of a portfolio and how does one target it?
Yeah. Well, portfolio could be like someone that owns 5+ properties, but
Great.
typically they like 10+. 20+ is ideal. You could pull that on PropStream. You just go to absentee owners, and then you click. There's an option there. How many properties does that person own? And you put 10 properties plus, and then it'll give you a list of people that own 10 properties plus. Ideally, when you first start pulling that data, you want to pull it by individual, not LLC, because then you're getting an individual. It could be a husband and wife that bought, over the course of 30 years, they were buying 1 or 2 properties a year, and now they own 30 properties, and it's not an LLC, so they're not super savvy, and they're likely going to be very open to a cash offer at a little bit of a discount, right? And if there's not a lot of that data in your market, then you do LLCs, but ideally individual ownership first.
Yeah, and it's also easier to penetrate through to the actual decision maker when it's a human versus an LLC. Skip tracing, no matter what, it's always at least one layer more difficult, typically with an LLC, because they're designed to shield. Some of them really are set up super designed to shield away from you finding out the owner. And so you have to be creative. And also, too, I challenge people out there that you understand that if you're not a millionaire, you're going to be having a conversation with a multimillionaire or somebody who's sophisticated. So you really can't have some worst VA out there calling what could be hundreds of thousands of dollars of a spread for you and expect to get the results that you want. If you want to drive the sports car, you better have somebody trained to have that conversation to handle the sports car.
Exactly. Another thing too is because I know I have a lot of friends that have been doing this for years, and everyone that's having the most success in this market are guys that are pulling data that's individual. If you're pulling data from someone that owns an LLC, even if you get the correct number, I mean, they own an LLC. They're more advanced. They're educated. It's going to be hard to get them to sell at a discount because they already know if they can set up an LLC and manage their properties, they already know they can list it on the market and get more money. So you really don't want to talk to that kind of person.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And then for most people out there, if you are a tired landlord and you got this big portfolio, it's always time and circumstances. The way I look at it, it's like they may not be right now, but once you've verified that is that person who owns those properties, hold on to that piece of coal until it turns into a diamond. Yeah. Too many people in this industry say, oh, it's coal now, throw it in the trash. Right. Well, until somebody gets a diagnosis, until one of their tenants lights the house on fire, until their husband falls on a ladder because he's the one who always repairs the properties. And so one of the things, and I'll kind of end on, at least on my side, is I think that this industry, when I came into it, I said, oh, these guys are really good at no contact nurture sequencing, where they're like, oh, I haven't got them on the phone, let me beat them up. But they're really bad at, hey, they told me they weren't interested, I'm going to follow up. They told me I wanted retail, I'm going to follow up later. So how do you feel about that as well, too? Are you going back and working those people who previously told you no?
So I tell my guys that the only difference between a good lead and a bad lead is time.
Amen.
That's it. That's all it is. So we don't stop calling our dead leads. We always call them. And then maybe, it's a dead lead and we'll call it again. We'll upload it. We'll call it again. We never stop because here's the thing. Sadly, and I think you'll see this, and we talk about it. like this business teaches you how hard life really is, right? Because you start to see, like, as you get older, it can get pretty shitty if you don't set things up properly for your family. Like, you're going to have sickness, you're going to have deaths, you're going to have disease, you're going to have legal problems with family members. Like, shit's going to happen as you get older. So you think just because someone doesn't want to sell now, they're not going to sell 2 years from now?
Yeah.
I mean, shit happens, unfortunately. That's the way life is. So, we want to be there to have an option for these guys that eventually are going to be ready, or they're going to have to sell.
Yeah, I love it, dude. I'm thinking, man, this is so crazy. We're talking about family and all the highs and the lows of things that can happen. And my man is at the beach right now. So, Vic, I'm going to let you go put them sandals back on and go out there to that beach.
Yeah,
But before,
I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Dude, I appreciate this conversation, and I love being able to bring in people like yourself who understand the REI space, and you're doing something different, but I follow your content. I've followed your journey, and it's something I'm like, yo, I want to walk in that shadow of the things that he's doing and share those as well, too. So how does my followers, how do our listeners, how do we find you? Again, how do we find the Skip Tracing Company, et cetera?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. My Instagram is at Vic. And then my last name, Heredia. So VicHeredia.com. My skip tracing company is QualitySkip.com. So I'm happy to help in any way I can. On a final note, because we had mentioned it, to help these guys get some of these deals, I mean, it's never about the property, it's about the situation. So if you don't focus on getting the deal, focus on helping the seller, and you're going to get the deal.
Couldn't have said it any better, brother. I love it. And that's showing that you're leading with offering value too. It's not just about taking somebody out of their property. It's providing them something in exchange for that equity. And if you believe in what you do in sales, it will come across that telephone. It'll come across that handshake. And I really believe that those guys and gals that are in the REI space, no matter what your exit strategy is, if you realize that there's more people to help that need your help than there are who don't, that like you'll exceed in this space. And it's a great way to build wealth.
That's what it comes down to. You got to serve. You got to serve.
Dude, I love it. All right, brother. Extend my regards to the family. Thank you for taking the time out and chatting with us.
All right, bro. Take care. Have a good one.
Be easy, my man. All right, ciao.
Take care.